Someone asks how you are, and before you've even thought about it, the word fine is already out of your mouth. It isn't true. You didn't sleep well, you're stressed about money, your back hurts. None of that matters because the lie left your mouth faster than the truth ever could have. Most people assume this is just social lubrication, a harmless habit picked up from politeness training as a kid. But the real story behind that automatic little lie is far stranger, and it reaches back long before humans had words at all. Deception did not arrive with language. It arrived with competition, the moment two creatures wanted the same thing and only one could have it. Long before your ancestors could speak a single sentence, other primates were already lying, just not with words. Primatologist Frans de Waal spent decades observing chimpanzee communities and documented behavior he came to call tactical deception. A lower-ranking chimp spotting food, then deliberately looking away and wandering in the opposite direction until the dominant male lost interest, only to double back later once the coast was clear. No words were exchanged. The entire lie was performed with posture, gaze, and timing, and it worked because the deceiver understood something crucial. What another mind believed mattered more than what was actually true. De Waal documented dozens of variations on this same basic trick across different chimp communities, and what struck him most was how situational the deception was. A chimp that had learned to hide a food discovery from one particular rival showed no need to hide it from a lower-ranking companion who posed no threat. This meant the deception was not a fixed behavior triggered automatically. It required tracking who specifically was watching, what that individual specifically knew, and adjusting the performance accordingly. That is not a simple reflex. That is a running model of another mind, built and updated in real time, purely so it can be manipulated. That single insight, the ability to manipulate what someone else believes, is one of the most cognitively demanding tricks a brain can perform. It requires holding two separate realities in your head at once, what you know to be true and what you want the other person to think is true, and never letting the two collide on your face. Some researchers have argued that this exact pressure, the arms race between deceiving others and detecting when you were being deceived, may have been one of the forces that pushed primate brains to grow larger in the first place. Bigger social groups meant more rivals to outmaneuver and more liars to catch, and the brains that got better at both games left more descendants behind. Here is where the story takes its strangest turn. You would expect that the best liars would be the ones most in control of themselves, cold and calculating, tracking every detail of the deception carefully. Evolutionary biologist Robert Trivers proposed almost the opposite. He argued that natural selection didn't just favor creatures who could lie to others, it favored creatures who could lie to themselves first. His reasoning was simple and unsettling. A lie is much easier to sell when the liar genuinely believes it. If you convince yourself of your own fabrication, there are no nervous tells to catch, no flicker of hesitation for a sharp observer to notice, no guilty pause before the words come out. The most convincing performance is the one where the performer has forgotten it's a performance at all. Trivers built much of this argument around the biology of deception detection itself. Humans, he pointed out, are remarkably good at reading microexpressions, catching the half-second flash of fear or discomfort that flickers across a face before it can be suppressed. That detection ability would have created enormous pressure on liars to eliminate the tell at its source. And the only truly reliable way to eliminate a tell caused by knowing you are lying is to no longer consciously know it. In Trivers' framework, the unconscious mind essentially runs a separate, more accurate model of reality, while the conscious mind, the part that talks and that other people can read, gets handed a cleaner, more flattering version. The deception is not sloppy. It is a deliberate division of labor between the parts of your mind that need to know the truth and the parts of your mind that need to perform confidence. Trivers called this self-deception, and once you understand it as a strategy rather than a flaw, entire categories of human behavior start to look different. The manager who genuinely believes he promoted the most qualified candidate, when the record shows he consistently favors people who remind him of himself. The parent who is certain their child's mediocre performance was the result of an unfair teacher, never their own. These are not necessarily conscious lies. They are, according to Trivers, minds that have been shaped to bury the inconvenient version of events so completely that the comfortable version feels like plain fact. The deception is not a betrayal of the self. It is a tool built into the self, aimed outward. Think about what this bought your ancestors in a small hunting band, where reputation was survival currency, and everyone was watching everyone else constantly. A hunter who took more than his share of the meat but genuinely believed his contribution justified it could defend that belief with total conviction, no sweating, no stammering, no cracks in the story. A rival trying to catch him in the act would find nothing to catch, because there was no conscious lie sitting there waiting to slip. The version of the story he told himself and the version he told the group were, for all practical purposes, the same story. Natural selection did not need to build a perfect liar. It only needed to build someone who could no longer tell the difference between the lie and the truth from the inside. There was nowhere to hide from a bad reputation in a group of this size. You could not simply move to another town, block a critic, or start over somewhere anonymous. The same 20 or 30 faces watched you hunt, share, argue, and fail, day after day, for an entire lifetime. In an environment like that, the ability to genuinely believe a flattering version of your own behavior was not vanity. It was armor. It let you walk back into the group each evening with the same steady confidence as someone who had done nothing wrong, because as far as your own conscious mind was concerned, you hadn't. This changes the picture of what deception was actually for. It was never primarily about tricking strangers out of resources in some rare moment of crisis. It was a constant, quiet tool for managing your own position inside a group you depended on for survival, smoothing over your failures, inflating your contributions just enough, softening the version of events that made you look bad. The lies that mattered most evolutionarily were rarely the dramatic ones. They were the small, continuous adjustments to your own story that kept your reputation intact day after day, year after year, inside a community you could not simply walk away from. Now consider how often this still happens to you today, without any dramatic stakes attached at all. Psychologist DePaulo ran a series of studies asking ordinary people to keep diaries of every lie they told over the course of a week, and the results were remarkable not for their scale of deception, but for its sheer frequency. Most people reported lying once or twice a day, and the overwhelming majority of these lies were small, low stakes, and aimed at managing impressions rather than stealing anything. I love it. Thank you for a gift you don't need. Sorry, I'm swamped instead of admitting you just didn't want to go. Traffic was terrible instead of admitting you left the house too late. None of these lies would have registered to your ancestors as anything unusual. They are the exact same reputation management tool running on modern hardware, applied to modern situations. What DePaulo's diaries revealed most clearly was how little guilt accompanied most of these lies. People did not report agonizing over them or rehearsing elaborate justifications afterward. The lies were simply told, absorbed into the flow of the day, and largely forgotten, which is exactly what you would predict if this behavior were less a moral failing and more a background process, quietly running the same way your heart rate adjusts without asking your permission first. The rare lies people did feel guilty about were almost always the bigger, riskier ones, the kind that threatened a relationship rather than simply smoothing a small social interaction. The strangest part is how automatic these lies have become, arriving before conscious thought even catches up. That fine that left your mouth at the start of this video wasn't a calculated decision. It was the same ancient reflex Trivers described, a mind quietly protecting your social standing before you had time to weigh the options, running exactly as it was built to run. You didn't choose to lie in that moment any more than your hand chooses to flinch from a hot surface. The system that manages your reputation operates faster than the system that deliberates, because for nearly all of human history, hesitation in front of a group watching your every move was far more dangerous than a small, smooth, well-told lie. Social media has simply given this ancient reflex a much bigger stage and a much longer memory. The curated photo, the achievement framed just right, the struggle quietly left out of the caption. These are not new inventions of a shallow digital age. They are the fire circle reputation game, played out at a scale your ancestors' brains were never designed to handle, in front of an audience that never stops watching and never forgets. The instinct to manage what others believe about you, and to believe your own polished version a little too easily, is exactly the instinct de Waal's chimpanzees were running with careful glances and deliberate detours, and exactly the instinct Trivers found buried in the architecture of self-deception itself. None of this means you are constantly, consciously scheming. Almost the opposite. The most successful version of this ancient tool is the one you cannot see yourself using, the one that feels from the inside, indistinguishable from simply being right. That is precisely what makes it effective, and precisely what makes it worth noticing. The next time someone asks how you are and "fine" leaves your mouth before you've even decided to say it, that is not a modern politeness script running. It is a survival tool older than language itself, still quietly managing your reputation, one small automatic lie at a time.